Welcome, my friend. Today we are going to travel back in time to a century filled with fear, death, war, and mystery. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world without modern medicine, without electricity, without fast communication. A world where people believed that disease was a punishment from God, where kings fought endless wars, and where millions of people died without understanding why. This was the 14th century. But was it truly the darkest 100 years in history? Let's discover the truth together. In this story, you will not only learn history, you will feel it. You will walk through cold medieval streets. You will hear church bells ringing for the dead. You will see hungry families searching for food. And you will ask yourself a powerful question. How did humanity survive such a terrible time? Stay with me until the end, because this century changed the world forever. The 14th century began in the year 1301. At that time, Europe looked strong and confident. Cities were growing. Trade was expanding. People believed the future would be bright. But slowly, dark clouds began to gather. The first great disaster was the Great Famine. Between 1315 and 1317, heavy rain destroyed crops across Europe. Fields turned into mud. Seeds could not grow. Food became very rare. Farmers watched their plants die. Animals starved. Soon, people began to starve too. Hunger is a terrible thing. When people are hungry for many days, their bodies become weak. They cannot work. They cannot fight disease. During the Great Famine, millions of people suffered. Some even ate animals that had died from illness. There are stories that some people ate grass, or even worse things to survive. Just as people began to recover from famine, another nightmare arrived. In 1347, ships arrived in Europe from Asia. On those ships were rats, and on those rats were fleas, and inside those fleas was a deadly disease. The Black Death. The Black Death spread faster than anyone could imagine. Within just a few years, it killed between 25 and 50 million people in Europe. That was about 1/3 of the population. Imagine 1 out of every 3 people you know suddenly disappearing. The disease was terrifying. People developed painful black swellings on their bodies. They had high fever. Many died within days. Families lost fathers, mothers, and children. Doctors did not understand germs. They believed the disease came from bad air or from God's anger. Cities became silent. Streets were empty. Churches were full of funerals. Some towns lost half their population. Workers were so few that farms were abandoned. In many places, bodies were buried in large mass graves. Fear changed people. Some blamed foreigners. Some blamed religious minorities. Violence and hatred increased. Instead of coming together, many communities became divided. Fear can destroy more than disease. While Europe suffered from the plague, another terrible conflict was happening. The 100 Years' War. This long war between England and France began in 1337. It did not last exactly 100 years, but it lasted more than a century. The war destroyed villages and farmland. Soldiers burned homes. Many innocent people died. Heavy taxes were placed on ordinary citizens to pay for the war. Life became even harder for farmers and workers. One famous figure from this war was Joan of Arc. She was a young French girl who believed God told her to help France. She led soldiers into battle and became a symbol of hope. But she was later captured and executed. Her story shows both courage and tragedy. In Asia, the 14th century was also a time of change and struggle. The Mongol Empire, once powerful and united, began to break apart. Political instability created violence and uncertainty across large regions. In China, the Yuan dynasty collapsed. After years of economic problems and natural disasters, the Ming dynasty rose to power in 1368. This marked a new beginning for China, but the transition was not peaceful. Natural disasters also played a role in making this century dark. Europe experienced what scientists now call the Little Ice Age. Temperatures became colder, winters were longer, crops were harder to grow. Food shortages continued in many areas. When people suffer from hunger, disease, war, and cold weather at the same time, society becomes unstable. Many peasants began to question the power of kings and nobles. Some even started revolts. One example was the Peasants' Revolt in England in 1381. Poor workers were angry about high taxes and unfair treatment. They marched to London to demand change. Although the revolt failed, it showed that ordinary people were no longer silent. Religion was very important in the 14th century, but even the church faced problems. During a period called the Western Schism, there were 2, and later 3, popes at the same time. Each claimed to be the true leader of the church. This confused many believers. When religious leaders fight for power, people begin to lose trust. The authority of the church became weaker. This would later help create big changes in Europe, including the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Despite all the darkness, the 14th century was not only about suffering. Difficult times can also create change. Because so many workers died during the Black Death, surviving workers became more valuable. They could ask for higher wages. Slowly, the social system known as feudalism began to weaken. The strict system where peasants worked for nobles started to change. New economic opportunities appeared. Trade expanded again. Art and literature also changed. Writers like Geoffrey Chaucer began to write about ordinary people, not just kings and saints. His famous work, The Canterbury Tales, gave voice to different social classes. In Italy, new ideas were beginning to grow. These ideas would later become the Renaissance. Artists and thinkers started to focus more on human life, science, and individual achievement. It was like a small light shining in the darkness. So, was the 14th century truly the darkest 100 years in history? In many ways, yes. Millions died from famine and plague. Wars destroyed countries. Fear divided communities. It was a century of deep suffering, but it was also a century of transformation. Out of pain came change. Old systems weakened. New ideas were born. Human society slowly began to move toward a new era. History teaches us an important lesson. Even in the darkest times, humanity does not stop. People adapt. They survive. They rebuild. The 14th century was not the end of the world. It was a painful chapter in a much longer story. Today, when we face problems in our own lives or in the world, we can remember this century. If people in the Middle Ages could survive famine, plague, war, and cold winters without modern technology, then we too can face our challenges. The 14th century reminds us that darkness and light often exist together. Suffering can create strength, crisis can create change, and even in the worst moments of history, hope never completely disappears. Thank you for traveling back in time with me. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep exploring history. Because when we understand the past, we understand ourselves better.